welcome to our April Buzz Pick of the Month author event. We're thrilled to have Lisa Scottoline and her editor Mark Tavani here to talk about Lisa's latest book, Eternal. This event is being held in support of Bank's Survive to Thrive initiative, with Ingram donating $1 for every registrant. Donations to Survive to Thrive will help indie bookstores and comic shops recover in post-pandemic times, and you can be a part of it. Simply text S2T to 44321 during this event to donate. And now, let's get to know our friends here today. Over the course of her stellar career, Lisa Scottoline has sold over 30 million copies of her page-turning thrillers and beloved essays. Her novels have always explored themes of family, justice, and love, and her masterpiece, Eternal, is the culmination of a lifetime of work. Mark Tavani is a vice president and executive editor with G.P. Putnam Sons, an imprint of Penguin Random House. He edits commercial fiction, thrillers, and narrative nonfiction, and has edited numerous award winners and New York Times bestsellers. Eternal is on sale now and available at your local independent bookstore. If you don't have one of those yet, visit indiebound.org to find an indie in your area. Throughout the conversation today, feel free to use the Q&A box to send in a question. We'll have a Q&A portion towards the end with some of the questions here and those submitted at your registration. Closed captioning is also available at the bottom of your screen. On behalf of Indie Book Buzz and Bookfinity, thank you so much for joining us today, and remember to follow Indie Book Buzz on Instagram and visit bookfinity.com for all the latest BuzzPick news. And now we are pleased to virtually welcome Mark Tavani and Lisa Scottoline.
Hello, everyone. Or as they say in Italy, ciao tutti. My name is Mark Tavani. As Courtney said, I'm an editor with G.P. Putnam Sons, and I'm thrilled to be talking today with Lisa Scottoline, author of the indie bestselling, New York Times bestselling, Publishers Weekly bestselling, USA Today bestselling book, Eternal, which I have right here. Lisa, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Bookfinity, Ingram, Bink, Indie Book Buzz. We are both so honored, right, Mark? I mean, wow.
Exactly.
We're in the bigs now, Mark.
And we're together for a great reason, which is to talk about your wonderful book, Eternal. So first of all, Lisa, congratulations to you. Eternal was recently published. It was an instant bestseller, and it continues to sell fantastically well. Also, the critical and consumer reviews have been amazing. So how does it feel to finally have this book out in the world?
Well, I mean, I'm a count your blessings person. So every morning I still can't believe that I get to be an author because I'm a person who loves books. And but I got to tell you, I was pretty damn excited when I got to be on the Indie Next list. And when I made the Indie bestseller list, it was just icing on the cake. And this being a pick this month, I've been to Ingram twice in my career and had a wonderful time back in the before times when you could actually be around people and drink. And it was wonderful. And just, I'm just super, super excited about this novel and just to be able to do this today. I really, and also that we're doing, and thanks for all of the planning that everybody did, that basically is doing good for independent bookstores because there is no worthier cause, and it is very dear to my heart too.
Absolutely. So, all right. So you're talking about booksellers, you're talking about bookstores. Lisa, your whole career, you have been a strong supporter of independent bookstores. What role have they played in your experience as an author throughout your career and with this book?
Oh, well, you know, it's so true. I mean, I've done 33 novels now, and I guess 8 works of nonfiction. But the first bookstore that would have me was an independent bookstore in my King of Prussia Mall. And Jeans, if anybody knows it. And I've always toured mostly in indies for 30 years. I shop in indies. In fact, I'm tempted to, but I'll break my ring light and all that stuff. But behind me we are in my family room. This is only one panel of books. These are the Y's and W's, the back end of the alphabet. These are signed. All the books in here are signed. And they're all from independents. They all have their gorgeous plastic covers, which make me feel very, very Tony. And I support them. I support independents, and I really try to promote them at every opportunity. And I have to say to people too, guys, you got to shop in one. I think this pandemic has been so many lessons for all of us. Today is a perfect example of how to reach people in a different way. God bless Ingram for doing this. But the real truth is, people are now, I think, coming to understand that if they want an independent bookstore in their neighborhood, they have to walk in and buy a book. And it's as simple as that. And so I've gotten very bold about saying that. I think we have to.
I agree. I agree
Yeah.
completely. So let's talk about Eternal. Eternal is a story that is set in Rome. It is a story of three young adults who have been best friends for their whole lives. It is a story of love and war, of family and food. It is a story that brings to life one of the world's great cities at one of its darkest moments. So every novel starts somewhere. Lisa, where did this one start?
Oh, Mark, we should tell him the story. Let's bust me. Why not? Okay, where did this one start? Okay, I have to try to tell things short. When I worked on this novel, it's big, it's something I've written about families and love and justice before, but I've never written about three families and all kinds of love, not just romantic love, but love between friendship, love between family, love of country. There's a lot of love in this book, and it's good because it counteracts the hate as fascism rises. It spans 20 years. I've never done that in a novel. So where did it begin? Well, we'll tell you the truth. It began when I handed it to Mark Tavani. It was 1,000 pages. And Mark, do you want me to tell it or you want to tell it?
You have to tell it.
Let's be real with these people because they deserve it. I got a call when you hand in your book to you sit there on tenterhooks. Like, I'm going to take you back to like when Vicky Carr sings, "Will it please be him? Oh, dear God." Like you wait by the phone. What do they think? What do they think? And Mark calls one night at 9:30, which is really odd. And I'm like, oh no, like, what does this mean? He said, "I love your book." And he says all these nice things, which I would love to repeat, but I won't. Because what he says is, that's the critical part, but I think it needs to begin on page 371. And as soon as he said that and said why, I said, oh my God, he's right. Like, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've written 2 novels a year in my life. I'm supposed to know how to do this. And Mark, you were so right. And we were new to each other and your judgment was excellent. So where did it start? Well, it starts with Elisabetta looking at 2 guys that she's grown up with, as you say, and thinking, I think I'm going to kiss that one first. And then all of a sudden by the riverbank, the other one kisses her. And I thought, that is the right start. So you were right. And you get all the credit for it. I'm happy to give it to you.
Well, that's where the publishing started, but
okay,
so much before that. I mean, so here's one thing that I love about this book. One of the things that makes the book what it is. You and I both have Italian roots, right? But we're obviously, we're both from Philadelphia, as it turns out. But you had never really written about Italy in this way, this kind of research, this kind of history. So let's talk about Italy for a second. I know you suffered admirably through research trips to Rome and all of its restaurants.
I did it for my art.
Understood. Of course, you've got to suffer.
Sacrifice.
But on the page, you didn't just write about the fun stuff. So did you know, and this is true, yesterday marked exactly 75 years since the day Mussolini was executed.
I didn't know that.
Well, 28. Wow. So he obviously plays a key role in this story, right?
Right.
He said it spans 20 years, it follows numerous families, and it tells us a lot about Italy at a really crucial moment. What was it like for you, an Italian American, bringing all of this Italian history to the page, researching it? What was the hardest thing about that? Or what was the most illuminating?
Well, it's interesting because, to answer the question directly, which is a new thing for me, I was very aware that, during my research over this time, I have always been interested, as I say, in law and justice. And it's really interesting to think about, we conventionally think of law as leading to justice, but it's really interesting when law will enact injustice. So when I learned about these fascist laws, and it was a barrage of them, one after the other, and it was really death by 1,000 cuts to the Jews. And we're skipping ahead now to the more serious part of the book. On the darker part of the book. First the law came for their professions, then property, then party citizenship in the fascist party, and then ultimately Italian citizenship. So when you started to understand that, I really wanted to tell that story because it really told of government and law going awry and perpetrating massive injustice. And when I did the research, I actually read everything, immersed myself, but I also consulted historians. And one who I won't name, he said to me, when I started to understand that there was a real true life event that happened in the center of Rome, that was in fact a war crime, and a lot of people didn't know about it. Like I didn't know about it, and people I talked to didn't know about it. And I said to him, why wasn't this the subject of Nuremberg? It should have been a Nuremberg like global trial. And he said to me, very sotto voce, as they say, nobody wanted another Nuremberg. And as soon as he said that, and when I was like, I do. And then when I went on one of the research trips, I remember I got out at an actual concentration camp, which is figures in the novel. It's actually in the novel, 3 hours outside of Rome. And when I got out of the cab driver was very quiet. And no cab drivers are ever quiet. I talk to anybody, like I'll talk to a parking meter, I'm lonely. And I talked to him and he says, we get out and he says, this is a very dark mark for Italy. And so I felt this, to sum it up, that because everybody cares about justice and we all have ideas, what is right and wrong or lawful or unlawful, moral, immoral, that's a real complex mix that you don't need a law degree to know. You just think about that and apply your own morality to it. But I was thinking, I want to really look at this situation and think about those victims of that war crime, that I can't sue anybody or get anybody in jail because the victims are gone, sadly, and so are the perpetrators. And so I thought, well, what justice can I do? Well, in a way, I can do what I've been doing for 30 years, which is tell the story. And it's embedded in a fiction. And I think the beginning is very transportive, and we can talk about that too, only because you want to set up the contrast for later. But I was very, very aware of the gravity of purpose, because real people were killed right in Rome. Yeah. And when I went back, one of the research trips was during the 75th anniversary of this actual event that took place in October 1943. So I met survivors, I met family. I saw that the greatest memorial was that at the beginning of this room, what they did was basically in ashes, etch people's names and then give these people their names back. They were the actual victims. And my moment was that I actually put some of those names in eternal, just to honor those victims and to give them the respect and the memory that they really never got and truly deserve.
Yeah. So that's the rich and troubling. And, I can't imagine how hard it was for you to write it, but that's the rich history behind this novel. Now, how you go about bringing it to the page is, of course, through character, right? So right. Every novel is about character. And in this case, we're talking about Betta, Marco, Sandro, and their families, these three who have been friends their whole life. And character is, of course, revealed in the crucible, right? Characters have to go through something to become real to us. So one of the things you and I talked about a little bit before, but I wonder if you could talk about now, how do you handle putting your characters through such horrible things, even as you love them?
I know. Well, look, let's take a second just to step outside of the novel and look what we've been through, right? Last March, we have been through a crucible. And I thought it was so instructive in a way because, you don't know that you're entering a historical period when you are in one. Like this is a story of three young people when it starts out. It's really three families too. Mm-hmm. And in 1930s Rome, and fascists, they're all fascists. You had to be. They don't know that they're about to enter this period that people will look back on and go, why does fascism work? Why did it take hold? How did Italy go so terribly wrong? Why did a country that, by the way, unique, so unique with respect to World War II fiction, that Italy was not anti-Semitic. Rome, the intermarriage rate in Italy with Jews and Gentiles was 50%. The mayor of Rome was Jewish. There was no issue. And when fascism first began, it wasn't anti-Semitic. So that fascist Jews joined the fascist party in the same proportion as Gentiles. They believed it. And then you start to ask, why did they join? Why did people become fascists? Well, they believed in law and order. They believed they were a little conservative by nature. And also, you take a character like Marco, when you talk about how do you make it real? Who are these characters? Marco is a really flashy, cool, great, sexy guy. He's the most popular kid in the class. However, he has a secret. And his secret is that he can't read.
Right.
Now, a modern reader will know right away he is dyslexia. And I have done a lot of research about dyslexia. And I had to research 1930s Rome. What was the view of dyslexia then? It was just the beginning of its understanding. But the bottom line is that Marco suffers from low self-esteem because he's very smart and he realizes he's way behind everybody else. Well, and fascism comes along and says, wait a minute, you're not dumb. You're brilliant merely because you're Roman. You know, that ultra nationalism was called Romanità. Right. And you can make that pitch to a Roman population that was that conquered the world at one time. That was the beginning of civilization. And what's so fascinating about it is that during my research, I learned, you know, that we all know that St. Peter's and Rome is the seat of Roman Catholicism. But how many of us really understand, because I didn't, that the Jewish community of Rome, situated in the so-called ghetto, is in fact the oldest continuously existing Jewish community in Western civilization. Oh my God. And as soon as I started to read it, I said, this is giving me so much. It was intimidating because it was more than I've ever dealt with in a novel. But I just said to myself, be not afraid. I'm an insecure girl. I'm like, you know, be not afraid. You can do it. And Mark, you were instrumental in that because I called you once or twice. And I said, Mark, I'm worried I've bitten off more than I can chew. And you were like, you can do it. And it was so nice. So thank you for that.
You proved me right. That's for sure. But here's one of the things about working with history that I think is so amazing about this novel. You do an incredible job of taking these fictional characters we just named, Betta, Sandro, Marco, their families, but then you have them interact with very real historical figures. There's a number that stand out to me, but I'm wondering, did you find that exciting or challenging? How did you manage that thing of making real historical figures talk to your fictional creations?
It's so cool because I would like to, well, certainly I want to impress everyone. And of course I want to impress you, my boss. So I'm supposed to act like I had it all planned, but I really didn't. I mean, what really happened is, for example, I won't give anything away, but there were, you know, amidst this very dark backdrop, there was some really wonderful heroic stories that are still not well known. I think people still are writing me going, wow, I didn't know that. For example, there was a guy named Monsignor O'Flaherty who worked at the Vatican, he was secretly hiding Jews in the Vatican, in some 700 apartments of the Vatican. He was called the Scarlet Pimpernel of the Vatican because he would dress in disguises to try to evade the Nazis who were trying to kill him. And so I was like, well, that's a really cool story. Now, I didn't sit there and go, how am I going to weave this in? I just, during the research, I was so frigging immersed. That's not a very pretentious literary term, but you can follow. I was just loving it so much. And I said, well, it just organically evolved. You know, I don't have any outline when I write any novel. I didn't for this one either. I didn't know who Elisabetta, which boy she would choose. I didn't know how any of this would work. But when the Jews of Rome started to come under attack, I thought, well, it would make sense if Massimo, who is Sandro's father, would turn, he'd turn to the Vatican. That would be very natural. And so I was able to use that. And I just feel like there is a God and he looks out for authors who don't make outlines. I don't know where he was during my first and second marriage, but he came through now in Eternal, and I'm very grateful.
So these three main characters all have very distinct personalities, and they respect each other's personalities, but they're different from each other. Marco is from a family of cyclists. His father owns a bar, but he made his name first as a cyclist, and Marco has talent as a cyclist, even if he doesn't want to do it, we learn. Sandro is this budding mathematician, incredibly brilliant. But then you have Betta, who is a waitress for her day job, but she's also a writer. And as the story goes on, we kind of see her trying to figure out what kind of writer she is, right?
Right.
How much of you or people that are close to you are in these characters?
Huh. Well, I think we begin with Elisabetta because I think you know, the whole task was, as you pointed out, and we had conversations about, you can't write it. I'm not writing history, and it's very writ large. And so you've got to make it small. Mm-hmm. You've got to make it not small, but relatable.
Right.
and intimate. So when I thought about Elizabeth, and I thought, well, when you're a young girl, and I thought back, and what's the first thing that happens besides first kiss? Well, one thing that happens is, and I hope you don't mind me talking about this, but it's like first bra. Like, I'm like, and I'm like, well, I never really read that in a novel. This is supposed to be like historical fiction. You're trying to throw some heat here, Scottoline. But I was like, no, really, you want to, what is it like? And of course, that stands in for a lot of things. Coming of age, sexuality, girlhood to womanhood. She wants a bra. And I actually gave her, frankly, what happened to me in my real life, which was like, I was a tomboy just like her, and also a waitress. We were, we didn't have means as a family. And kids came, the mean girls came to me and said, "Do you need a bra?" And I was so mortified. Girls will remember this when you walk around, I hold my own book, but when you walk around school and you with your books against your chest, like I remember that self-consciousness. And so I gave her that. And so that was my job, to sort of think about each little point. Like we go to Sandra, who's so preternaturally smart, but you know what? That's all cool to teachers, but it's not very cool to students.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes for an uneasy relationship with his best friend, Marco. Because what I really wanted was a love triangle that I knew it was in a way no win, because we were all good friends and she has to choose one. That's her quandary. But in the end, I wanted the boys to stay friends. What tears them apart is the times. What tears them apart, because ultimately a lot of novels, including anything I'm writing, is about identity. This is really, what is each person's identity, as you say correctly. Elizabeth is she thinks she wants to be a journalist. Well, that ain't going to work, because in fascism, it's all propaganda. And then now what do I do? It's all false starts when you're young. You don't really know. You try things, you fail. That's good. That's part of growing up. Marco finds his way. So they're going to, but when Marco becomes a fascist and begins to rise in the party and see what his own beloved party is doing to Jews, like his best friend, he starts to say to himself, am I my uniform? Who am I? When they take for example, when Sandro's father, Massimo, a devout fascist, is turned on by the fascist regime because he's Jewish, he doesn't know who he is. He said, who am I if I'm not fascist? So identity, which I kind of love, is also a question that we have when we're coming of age, and also when we're 40, and probably when we're 65, just hypothetically speaking. And that's kind of great. I mean, I never wrote historical fiction before, but I decided I wanted to. And with your help, I was able to. And God bless readers who came to it in independent bookstores who supported it 1,000-fold. I'm so grateful.
Amen. Absolutely.
Yes. Amen.
Now, let's get real for a second.
Okay.
Let's talk about food. Okay.
Yeah.
You have a character in this novel, Nona, who makes some of the best pasta in Rome. Now, I have mentioned to you that my own Nona passed away a few years ago. Whenever I picture her in my mind, the caption for that picture is one word long, which is mangia, right? She was forever telling us to eat, because that is the Italian way. Now, in this novel, food has such a presence. I mean, you can taste this novel. You can smell this novel, right? Elisabetta is, in her day job, a waitress. She works with Nona. She learns how to make pasta from Nona. Sandro and Marco's families, whenever they get together, it's over food, right? Big heaping plates, which you describe lovingly. What does food mean to you from your upbringing and in your life now? And how did you find the right way to kind of bring food to this novel?
Right. Well, it's almost like you couldn't keep it out, because first off, I love food. I mean, my mother used to say we have tomato sauce in our veins instead of blood. It's kind of true. And so, and it was also, there was a secret reason though. Dante has a great quote, and I'll butcher it now, but it's something like, there is no greater sorrow than to remember in times of sadness how happy you once were.
Right.
And I said, that's kind of brilliant, and also kind of true, and what you have to do in any novel. My job is to show it, not tell it, right? And so I thought, well, this is kind of great, because Italy is so much about food. They live to eat. It's part of these characters. Food is love. I mean, the epigram at the beginning of this is love conquers all thing, and food, carbohydrates are subsumed in that, But my secret reason was this, that I had to show the plentifulness, the importance of food, the abundance of it. I wanted you to taste the breading. I wanted you to feel the kind of heavy salt and the delicious tomato sauce, because what happens when Italy starts to enter the war and times get tough is that food is rationed. And then when times get really tough, Italy is bombed. The south of Italy was just decimated, and the wheat fields were destroyed. And honestly, my research showed me that that was a lot of what turned the tide in Italy. They didn't expect it to be so hard, and they didn't expect to starve. And then when the Nazis occupy Rome, they actually weaponized food. They weaponized food against the Jewish community. So I thought it's so silly, because it's embarrassing to admit, but I listened to the audiobook of my book 3 times, and I listened to it a lot, and I listened to it today. And there's one little part of it where I was like, this gets me, because it's when Sandro and his family is having tomato sauce and it's watered down. And if you there's nothing worse than runny tomato sauce. My tomato sauce, you could spackle a wall with my sauce, right? And it should be scraping off your teeth, but then you should run. And I thought that's really what it's about. And to do that, to feel the angst and the deprivation that they would feel, you have to understand how abundance it once was. So I took my cue from Dante. How am I doing?
You followed in his footsteps perfectly.
Yeah, all right.
700 years later. So even when you get to the end of this novel, all of that you've delved into with food throughout the novel, when we get to the end, and I'm not going to give anything away for anybody in the audience who hasn't had a chance to read it yet, but again, the novel kind of closes around food, right? There's an epilogue to the novel, but before that, we get a final scene where everybody kind of once again gathers over food. And that makes me think about how this novel, we talked about some of the darkness that the novel invokes, right? And it always comes back to me that you were writing this novel at such a complicated time in our world. This is a historical novel, but it just kept resonating in ways that were unexpected and almost unbelievable. But one of the things that I think is most important about this novel is love wins. It's a novel that acknowledges all the darkness of the moment, but ultimately love wins. And another motif beyond food that I think you stitched into this novel so beautifully is this play between light and dark. We start in light, these 3 young people on a summer afternoon, and they're kind of finding their feelings for each other as they get a little bit older, all this kind of stuff. And we move into the darkness that was true to Rome at that time. And then we come out. And like you said, the novel opens with the epigraph, right? Love conquers all. And that is ultimately where you go. So in crafting that, I can understand why it was important to you to say that, but how did you do that? How did you use this novel, this dark moment in history, to tell a story that is full of love and ultimately full of hope?
Oh, well, that's so sweet of you to say. I would like to say it was just all my grand design, but what happens is, and I'm happy to demystify it, frankly. I don't think people should think it's magic. It's me trying to figure out what these characters would do next. And that tells you who they are. And at the same time, it drives the plot, which is really kind of great. And I don't think I'm giving anything away, but I think this is the answer to the question I kind of want to highlight. And because sometimes you don't know what you really honestly don't know what they're going to tell you. And so these people undergo a crucible. And in telling about a very specific crucible, 1930s, 1940s Rome, fascism to Nazism, and then the revelation that Mussolini's terrible and this is all a huge mistake, and these characters realize the mistake they've made. At the end, I had a character come out. It was Marco's mother, who hasn't said a word during the novel, and she's minor. And I want to say this though, because I think she comes out, and I was like, she's got to make a speech because she is that generation. She would make the speech. And then I thought, what it ends up being, if you tell the specific, people extrapolate it. And so the speech she gives is very briefly one that we all feel. Anybody who is a home cook, it always comes back to food. Because I said, works in a kitchen. She works in a kitchen in their bar, and she works in a kitchen in their family. She says, I spend all my time in the kitchen, whether I'm upstairs or downstairs. Nobody knows that well. Nobody, because I don't come out of the kitchen much. But every day I stand before a refrigerator. And every day I look at the things that are inside it, the leftovers, the scraps. And I say, what can I make with what I have? I don't have all the ingredients I want. I don't have the best fresh basil. I don't have good garlic, but I have parsley. And I take the ingredients I have and I make what I can. And with God's grace, I produce a meal that I can be proud of. And I thought, that's what happens during a war. And by the way, I think it's what happens during a pandemic, that we didn't know what we were getting into. We're sort of still processing it. We're trying desperately to figure out what can we do with what we have. And isn't that amazing? And isn't it a wonderful affirmation of what human beings do every day before they enter a period of history that they didn't even know that they were living through until they look back and go, holy God, what just happened? And it all became together. And I know when I wrote that little speech, I started crying. Like I'm trying not to cry now because I said, oh my God, that's right. It's just a lady in a kitchen, just like all of us are just trying to make do with what we have to get through and survive. And that force is love. That's what makes you put it together and put the food on the table and be proud to serve it to your family. It doesn't get better than this. I didn't have to write it. The world gave it to me. It gave it to me, I swear.
You know, working on this book at this time, so many times I came to think, if Beta and Sandro and Marco and Maria and Beppe and all of them can do this, then we're going to be okay. Like what, you know, no matter how complicated it gets, we're going to be okay. Now you talked a little bit earlier about revisions, but one of the things I want to ask you, especially if there are any aspiring writers in the audience, one of the things I'm always curious about is you really write from the heart. You know, that is you. And how do you, no matter how desperately an editor asks, how do you actually do the work of revising your heart?
Well, you know, it's mechanical as much as that sounds so great. And that's lovely of you to say. I think what you do is this, and anybody can do it. So if anybody's listening, I really encourage you. My motto was just do it. So I do 2,000 words a day. And in first draft, I just try to figure out what would happen next. I don't go back and edit anything because I don't know if I have a story to edit. And then amazingly, luckily, I'm in a state of complete agita, which is another literary term. I'm nervous all the time, but I do think a little that nervousness communicates. I said to myself, girl, you are a thriller writer, whatever that is, but I like fast moving things. I don't want to bore anybody. Like they paid money and they deserve a ride, but you have to write historical fiction at the pace of a thriller. Now go. Now the answer to all of that is none of that happens in the first draft. None of it. The first draft is you just telling the story to yourself in the most pedestrian, horrible, the verbs will suck, all that crap. And then when you finally have a story, Hemingway says, write drunk, edit sober. And I don't do that literally, but, but when I'm at the end, I'm the happiest girl in the whole world because I'm like, now I know I have a book. Now all I have to do is make it better. And then when you edit it, you are really revising your heart. You have to become very, if I can say, bitchy. You know, you have to really say to each sentence. And I learned this from writing thrillers. All writing feeds all writing. I write humor. There's humor in this book. Everything, you use everything. In this book, I left everything on the field, man. There's not a fact or anything. All my superpowers were employed, such as they are. But the truth is, when I look at each sentence, I go, justify yourself. Mm-hmm. You have to justify yourself because I read a lot. I live alone. I love to read. There are people, God bless them, who will read 300 pages at a clip. I do that. And I'm very mindful. You told them that on page 150. You don't need to repeat it.
Yep.
Don't.
Yep.
Don't condescend to anybody. Explain as little backstory as possible. Mm-hmm. And I have my little things that I do like that, but it's all in the editing. The revision is everything. And then I was lucky enough to have you to set me on the right course. And you really, really did. I'm very happy that this book is a normal length book and not, the doorstop that I was imagining.
Now, for all the things that did change, one thing that never changed, not once, we never even talked about it, was the title. Okay. This book is eternal from the moment it was born. How did that happen? And what does it mean?
Oh my God, I'm bad at titles because you see me like I am a very wordy person and I'm warming up at about 20,000 words. And think of one word, think of two words. I can't. But this one, because I'll tell you how it came to me. It came to me on a Roman street while I was doing research and also eating pizza for research. But I swear to God, I was eating the pizza, which was so good. I actually cried from this pizza. And I actually, this is a digression, but I grabbed the waiter and I'm like, this is so good. He's like, get off me. So I let him go. But I remember looking down the street and I thought of an old vocab word that I probably learned for the SATs, which was palimpsest. Right. Now, palimpsest, right, is in medieval times when monks would write on manuscripts and they would write on parchment. And when they would, of course, they didn't have a lot of, it was like sheep's hide or whatever. And they had to write over it. So they would wipe it away and then write on top. And a palimpsest is when you can see the writing that's underneath it. It's layers of time made visible.
Right.
Right. And when I saw that on the Roman street, because I happened to be around St. Peter's and I saw like that really old brick they have. And then I saw some old marble. And then I saw kind of a newish building. And I said, that is the layers of time made visible. And then I lost my damn mind because I actually said, you know what is the best layers of time made visible? Honestly, because as cool as buildings are, I don't relate to buildings. I relate to people. I'm a people person. And I thought the layers of time made visible is a family because I have a single mom. I have a daughter. I have myself. I have my mother. And then I started to think, here I am, this magical pizza gave me all these thoughts, all the more reason you should eat carbohydrates whenever you can. And I was like, this is so interesting because in a way, this conflates time. You know, they say you turn into your mother. Like, well, I kind of think I kind of am my mother.
Right.
Nona in this book is a lot of my mother. And I kind of think I'm a little of my daughter too. And when you really think about your family vis-a-vis time, you understand that Faulkner was right. The past isn't even past. And you know what? The future isn't even ahead because it's all here right at this minute, all at once. And I said, that's eternal. And that was the title. And it could not be anything else. I just was like, you let me have it. You were like, I love it. I'm like, I love it. And we were lucky. We were lucky.
It's a great title. And it even is underscored by by Rome's own, nickname, right? The Eternal City. I mean, it just kind of dovetails with everything. It's perfect.
No, thank you.
Yes. And so another thing that kind of goes along with the title, when a consumer meets the book, the other thing they're going to confront right away is the cover. One of the things about this cover, and you and I have talked plenty about it, but for anybody out there who's curious about the process, sometimes covers take a long time and they involve a good amount of compromise or rethinking or figuring out. This took none of that. Our art director read the book and he came to us with a set of possible covers. And this was the first one in the stack. And he put it first because he thought it was the strongest. And we saw it and none of us had any doubts. And I sent it to you and you felt the same way. What does this cover evoke? What does this cover do?
Felt the same way. I cried. That's how I know it's good when I cry. I thought it said a woman. By the way, I like that she's not like young, hot, and sexy. She looks like a real woman to me. She looks like a person.
Right.
I mean, I think authenticity is so important in a novel, in any novel. And I think if I can say, I feel like I'm a little known for that. Authenticity of voice, of characterization, of place, of time. And I thought she's exactly right. I also loved, there's this wistfulness. That's that Dante quote there's a looking back on time. And I thought this captured that. Right. I also thought it captured you're not sure what she's looking at. She's obviously not looking at a plane because that was a different time. And I also thought writing is such an interesting thing to do. And I really do encourage people to give it a shot. And one thing that happens when you write and you're immersed in it, like I got with this book, is you find your brain making choices that you're not aware of. So that one of the trips I went to Rome on research, I said, go in October, because that's when this really seminal true life event happened. And when I went there, I said, look how much gold there is. There is so much gold. The sun has a quality. The late day sun has a quality. I found myself using verbs like Marco was gilded by the late day sun, or the sun burnishes things or tarnishes things. I got so into the sun and the gold, and I was like, this really got that shimmer.
Yeah.
You know, and also little details, but I want to give you credit. And I also want people to know we're all book lovers. We think about everything. We are the most detail-oriented people in the planet, right? Because I said, Mark, you know, I really don't want it to feel, I want it to feel like paper. I want this to be immersive. We discussed how it does feel like paper. We chose a font that was a little bit old style.
Mm-hmm.
Because I wanted I wanted you to feel, I had to change my voice, my authorial voice. I'm like, I can't talk like this or like my modern characters do. It's anachronistic. I had to, you know, study literature of the time and get the locutions. For example, instead of gossip, they say people talked behind their hands. I had to say that. Right. But best of all, which the props to you, but talks about detail. I found online a map, a guide from 1925 Rome, which is right over there. And I said, Mark, I would love to put a map to help readers orient. Do you think we could put this map in? And you were like, hell yeah. And you guys even got the rights. And there it is. This is the actual map. You can see, because these characters, three, Elizabeth, Marco, and Sandro, grow up just a stone's throw from each other and right near St. Peter's and the Jewish ghetto. And I wanted the reader to know that. So, you know, in the end, you know, we love books. I love the connection they give me to readers to each other. I think that's why book clubs are so, you know, important. And sadly, while I've noticed, because I get a lot of email with respect to book clubs, I hold a party here every year for 13 years for book clubs. 1,000 people come to the farm, actually 1,500. But I've gotten a lot of notes from them going, with the pandemic, our book club has kind of fallen apart. And I go, that's sad. So just if I can just suggest this, because what we did, kind of like what everybody, Ingram is doing today, is instead of the book club party, we said, submit your book club, read Eternal. I'll do a Zoom with 25 book clubs, right. But also more importantly, for the people who aren't in a book club, I'm single. I live alone. I'm a very a cappella. It's easy to feel left out, and I never want anyone to feel that way. So I said, listen, if your book club's falling apart, or you're just a single gal on your own, or a guy, get the book, read it, send your picture in, and we will make a big book club Zoom, and we will be invited. And it's a way to, because the key thing about books and why we love them is not only their physicality, although I love their physicality, it's that connection that we have between each other. It's really love, honestly.
Absolutely.
It's love.
Absolutely. Now we're going to get to have some fun. We have some questions from our audience. So I'm going to answer some of these. They're in no particular order. So I'm just going to dive in. So Lauren Matichik asks this question. What has been your most unique source of inspiration through your writing career?
Wow, what a hard question. I think in Eternal, I think this true life event was a very unique thing to me, because I had such an awareness of the importance to the Jewish community. Also the importance, because I've read a lot of Holocaust literature and none was talking about Italy. And I thought, this is, I mean, really kind of like the first popular American fiction to deal with what happened in Rome during the Holocaust. That was galvanizing responsibility. That was really a North Star for me. And I've never had that before. Right. And I never want to denigrate what I've written. I love thrillers, and I've written domestic dramas, and there is murder in them usually. And even then, I've always felt like I'm not one of these, the bodies pile up people. Right. If there's a murder in a book, because every person matters, so every death matters. Generally, you're going to go to a funeral. You're going to understand the ripple effects of crime, of violence, of lawlessness. I'm always looking at those themes. But Eternal presented a really unique, challenging, And I think it was important to get it right. And I think, if I can say so, I think it's an important book for that reason.
Yeah. When we first talked about it, way back when, I'll never forget, you were sitting there at the table. Our whole team was there, and you said this was the book you were born to write. I mean, you can't find a more unique inspiration than that.
I know, and it's
right?
true. It's really true.
Now, here's an easier one.
Okay.
Marie Lou asks a great question. If you had to live in Italy, what town would you live in?
I would live in Rome. I frigging love Rome. I love its chaos. I love its history. I love that you can turn the corner. You know, I was reading about Bernini, and if you were in Rome and you go through some one little alley, and then all of a sudden the Pantheon's there, and you're like, it's a surprise.
Yeah.
For example, I did quick research point in this book. Mussolini did a very smart thing, which was doing in this respect.
Right.
He excavated Rome so that the ruins were exposed, and he rechanneled the traffic plan so that people would drive by it. That happens in the book. I brought it out because he wanted people to see their glory. But one of the things he did was he was the one who destroyed what used to be in front of St. Peter's Basilica, and destroyed it and made what some people then called a runway. Yeah. And that's when I learned that what Bernini wanted and what those who planned Rome wanted was you to turn and be surprised. And I thought, isn't that wonderful? And also kind of instructive for me, because as a novelist, a plot twist or a reveal or a surprise ending, which to a certain extent, I think all of those are in this book. We are trying, Stephen Sondheim says, surprise me. And that's true in any of the arts. So I think it would be Rome because it is every day so surprising.
Yeah. I will drill down and ask, if you lived in Rome, where would you live?
I think I would live where Elisabetta lives in Trastevere.
Me too. It's
so relaxed and cool, and it's got just everyone hanging out and the food and everything. And I'm a gardener, so I also love the vegetation. I love that everywhere you look, it's beautiful, and there's oleander growing against this incredible, the texture of this cover is just that plaster, and then this kind of crumbling, and underneath there's brick, and you see the brick, and the fact that it's a ruin only makes it more beautiful. You would never patch it. Yeah. I just love all that. I just love it.
People have asked me before the question that Marie asks you, and one thing I always think is funny, I always end up having an argument with some people about Florence versus Rome. To me, there's no comparison.
Right.
Florence is wonderful to visit, but if I'm going to live there, I'm going to live in Rome.
Agree, absolutely.
So, okay, different kind of question.
Okay.
Lynn Almeida asks, can you tell us about your adorable dog? I think from your author photo. The shop dog, she explains, the shop dog here at Spellbinder Books, Calvin, is a Cavalier too.
Oh, yay. Oh, I know. And there's a Cavalier at Ann Patchett's store in Parnassus too. Here's Boone. I have 4 dogs, and they're all Cavaliers, and they're all locked in the bedroom right now going, what the hell? So I just here's what I think. And actually I put this sentiment in this book. I didn't really know that I would be so thoroughly a cappella. You think your marriage is going to work. You think, life gives you some curves, and I have so many blessings in my life, and I love what I do, but I find myself on my own. And then I say, then the good thing is I can get any dog, rescue any cat. I have rescued ponies. I have a rooster that will never shut up that I named Bradley Chicken Cooper. And why this matters, and why it's the answer to the question, is that what I started to realize is that I'm just feeling love, and love fills your heart. And I had Elizabeth to think this, whether you give it or you receive it. And that is a true and wonderful thing. So many of us find ourselves either divorced or widowed, or life happens. And God knows we've lost people during this pandemic. People are grieving and solitary. But our task, and part of just being a human being, is to try to make ourselves happy. So dogs matter. I have one point, I have her say, I have cats too. Cats matter. Elizabeth does that. She has a cat and she talks to the cat and the cat watches her make out with her pillow. And well, I don't do that. But is this too much information, Mark? Is this?
Oh, it's perfect.
But the truth is, we all want love in our lives. And I think it's a good and healthy thing to try to get some, even if it has fur, and Cavaliers just rock.
Also, some of the writing you do in this book about Elizabeth's cats is some of my favorite prose in the book, just the way you describe the cats. It's wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Well, cats are always, I think people know that if you have a dog, like when my daughter is home, all we do is talk about the dogs or what they're thinking. You know, you're always trying to imagine what your animal's thinking, and you kind of know, and you're kind of right. So she does that too. And I think a lot of people who live with pets do that.
Right. Totally. Okay, so Jean Smith asks, what part of the writing process is most enjoyable for you?
Oh my God, the most enjoyable actually was for this especially was I loved when I got your notes, Mark, because we truly, not that they were easy, but I was like, you know what? It was wonderful to have somebody, you know, the relationship with your editor is very interesting because it's a lot. No one reads my stuff. I don't want anybody to read my stuff. I don't send it to anybody. There's no writing group. It's the me show. And I kind of like that. It's my vision. So it was new to me to sort of have someone else talk about the book with me and formulate it and truly collaborate. And what's interesting is, you know, it's almost like the task. I hope I don't digress for a minute, but I review books. I've reviewed books for the Washington Post, for the Times, for Inky. When your job as a reviewer is somewhat similar, you're not going to go, I don't like this kind of book. You're going to try to go, what could have made this book a better version of what it is? Right. And I think you correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but that's a little what you do. You looked at this book and you said, I know what you're trying to do here. Think about doing it this way. And that's what my editorial letter was. There was a lot of pages, but I appreciated it. And it was really, really a wonderful experience. And I think I just really grateful to you because I think that was really wonderful to me because I wanted to write this book. I felt like it came into the world. We did that major rewrite, taking off the front end, and then I really edited it down. And something came out that was better than it ever would have been because we did it together. And I'm really, really grateful. Just great.
I mean, I can't say how much I appreciate that, but I will also tell you, it's really interesting just for this part of the process. That 9:30 call that you mentioned, I was on a family vacation at the time, but I could not let this wait. And my wife and daughters understood, like, this was a call you and I needed to have as soon as possible after I finished it. And I was in the lobby of a hotel in Montreal. And that's when I called you. And luckily it was a big lobby, so I was able to kind of have my own space. But the truth from my perspective was I was incredibly trepidatious. I knew what I was saying and I believed it, right? I believed it 100%. So I wasn't worried about that. But every time an editor puts ideas forward, there's a nervousness because you aren't sure how it will strike the writer. What I'm never trying to do, of course, is to change the book. I'm trying to just help you write the book you set out to write. Right. But you never know how it'll be received. And so I will say thank you back to you because the way you received notes was so generous and so welcoming. And that's why the process worked.
Oh, well, thank you for that.
It's true.
Well,
go ahead. So here's, we have a question from Miriam Khan. And this is a question specific to this time, which I think is a great question. How has your writing routine changed over the past year?
Honestly, it hasn't.
Okay.
I think I was distracted like everybody else. Mm-hmm. I was worried about people. It wasn't easy to write on those days, but I tried to because I love the book Bird by Bird, and everyone's familiar with Annie Lamott. And she says, you know, give yourself permission to write a quote shitty first draft. Mm-hmm. And I'm mindful of that. So I really think it's important. I feel like writing is very behavioral. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, writing Eternal is no different from I write a humor column. It's in the Sunday Inquirer in Philadelphia, but it's also on my Facebook page every Sunday. You can read it for free. That exercise is a really good exercise because you got to write 800 words and get to the point, as we've seen. I'm not always great at that, but So I say to myself, sit down and write your 2,000 words, whether they're good or not.
Yeah.
So and I do it. I start around 9. Sometimes I'm done by 6 and then I feel like a goddess, but usually it takes me, then I divide the day. Then I go, okay, you're going to have to work the evening segment.
Right.
And I work the evening segment. And so in a way, it didn't really change. It was fueled by Dunkin' Donuts coffee, extra cream, extra sugar, a lot of M&Ms, and a lot of spaghetti. Listen, however you do it, you just have to get it done. And any way you write is the right way. I truly believe that. Don't you, Mark? That's true, isn't it? There's no rules.
I certainly think there's no answer. I wouldn't say that for everybody, any style works. I do think every writer has to find the style that works for them.
Right.
I think that for some writers, they make the mistake of writing too slowly, and then they overthink everything as they write it, and they never get anywhere. And some writers, I don't think anybody necessarily makes the mistake of writing too fast, as long as they're like you, they're willing to go back and revisit it. If you're going to revisit it, then I think speed is a real ally. But the dailiness of it that you're talking about, I used to work in a little bit. I wasn't his editor, but I would help on his books for a few years. John Irving. John was a wrestler, right? That was he had spent a lot of time being a wrestler and being around wrestling teams. And he always spoke about writing as such an athletic thing. It was so physical for him, right? And that's the way that he always viewed writing. My point just is that I think every writer has to kind of like, they can't take somebody else's system and use it. It won't work. It's got to be there. It's got to work for them.
Right. And I'm lucky because I get to do it all day. I mean, and I do think he's right about the physicality. Like I try to do dumb stuff like go to sleep early. I even have a treadmill desk. I make sure I exercise. But the truth is, for people who are listening who want to write, maybe can't have a day job. I had a day job for the first 2 years.
Right.
Then give yourself, my advice would be to give yourself a word count like 100 words.
Right.
Get up in the morning.
Yep.
And I always think of it like it's a little candle. Your wish to be a writer is your little candle.
Yep.
When you're not 7 anymore, people stop asking what you want to be when you grow up. But you're allowed to want to do anything. You're allowed to want to write historical fiction when you're a thriller writer. You can do anything you want. It's still America. But you got to protect your little candle and, say no to some things and try to prioritize yourself, which is very hard when you're an adult. You got mortgages, you got bills, you got laundry, you got kids, and you probably have a cat. So change that litter box and get back to work.
And you definitely have 4 dogs and a pony.
You definitely, and a rooster.
Now we only have a couple minutes left.
Okay.
So there's a question here that plays right off of something you were just saying about being a thriller writer and wanting to write historical fiction. So Mara Tugman asks, tell us about writing about Mary D'Annunzio in Philly and going into Rome in World War II. Compare the processes.
Oh, that's so interesting. And thank you for that. Mary D'Annunzio is a series character I have in Rosado and Associates, and someday I'm going to get back to them because you see, if you've read that series, in Killer Smile, I dipped back into fascism, and also in Vendetta Defense, I dipped back, and I've wanted to write this, and I've been warming up. And I think the truth is, it wasn't really different. And that's what I taught myself, that Elisabetta and Mary D'Annunzio are different characters, and they certainly have different families. But I remember beginning to write Mary D'Annunzio and going, well, if you're going to write a character who is a youngish Italian-American in Philadelphia, her family is going to be in her face, like for good or for bad. You can't. And then I remember thinking, well, I don't really see that in thrillers like moms who do this and dads, and they want you home for Sunday dinner. But that was my life. Right. So I remembered that, and I've learned that lesson. I'm such a fan of, I feel so lucky, and I love that I learned on the job, especially for women who are thinking about writing, because I think we have this thing where we feel like we're not ready. They have to do X, Y, and Z before we're ready. Yeah. And that's just about risk and reluctance to take risk. Yeah. And I felt that. I said, well, I'm not ready to write historical fiction. And now that I've done it, I'm like, Lisa, wow, what took you so long? Like, come on, lighten up, get out of your own way. And that's not the worst thing. So in any event, what I taught myself in 30 years on the job and 33 novels, and also the nonfiction, is that writing Mary D'Annunzio isn't really different from writing Elisabetta d'Orfeo. I just have to think about who this character is, the family that shapes her, the location that grounds her. Yeah. And as Stephen King says, imagine the scene and then reproduce it for the reader. That's all you have to do.
Yeah. Okay, Last question, and I
Yes.
apologize. It's probably the hardest one. I'm sorry,
Uh-oh.
but it's a good one.
Okay.
Roma Mott asks, what sage advice would you give to your 12-year-old self?
Oh my God. That's actually easy
Good.
because I have it, because I have only one piece of advice worth having. Ready? Because I told it to my daughter. And my mother told it to me. That's how you know we're all the same person sitting before you now.
A palimpsest.
Exactly. And it is be yourself. It is really, really true. It's true when you're writing. You can only write what you would write. And a little bit, if you're nervous like I am, you go, well, are you allowed? Or also, I've never seen that before. And then you realize that the thing you're worried about putting in is actually the thing that you need more of. And you know, I learned it when I was writing humor in these funny essays. I go, the thing, if it doesn't make me cringe, if it's not so true that it makes me cringe to tell it, it won't make them laugh. Like my perfect example is when I, realized I had a gray chin hair and I was turning into an Amish man. Like, I don't really want to say that. Like, that's embarrassing. But women, like, I plucked for this Zoom meeting. Like, it's a baby's bottom down here, man. So what I'm saying is, you can't be afraid. Be not afraid, because what makes the connection in books, and then I'll finally shut up, what really makes the connection in books is the truth. That's what authenticity is a fancy word for. It's emotionally true, or it's literally true. And as soon as you say something really true that you maybe are a little shy about saying, people hear it. Human beings recognize truth. It has a ring. And that's when the connection happens. And that's why books are magic. And that's why we need independent bookstores to spread the magic throughout this amazing country.
Absolutely. Well, Lisa, it's 7:01. That means it's time. So on behalf of everybody here in the audience and on behalf of myself, let me just say thank you for being yourself. It was great to talk, as it always is. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ingram, Bink, Indie Buzz, everybody. And Bookfinity, we really appreciate it. And thank you, Mark. You're the best.
Pleasure. I'll see you later.
Bye-bye.